Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our first webinar of 2022. Happy New Year to you all. We're just waiting for one of our panelists to join, but meanwhile, I will introduce the others. So first of all, I'm really delighted to welcome Dr. Patricia Tumelty, who is Executive Director of Mind Jersey. We also have Lauren Perchard-Rees, who's Chief Executive of Macmillan. And of course, Vini Jones, General Manager at Grace Trust. Hi, Vini. And in a second, we hope to have Yvonne Corbin, Chief Exec of Caring Cooks. So the topic today is we're really looking forward to 2022 and the challenges that are facing the sector. And really, we've got our expert panel along to give their views and to talk about it, and hopefully at the end we'll have a chance to take some questions from all of you who are joining us today. Right, so I think what we'll do is we'll get started. I think Yvonne's just got a minor technical issue, and which we're trying to work on now. So what I really want to start with is to start with Vini and talk about how Grace Trust is dealing with COVID as a day-to-day issue rather than a temporary phenomenon. So, Vini, can you talk to us about the learnings that you've gained for the past year and what you can do to implement them and how that might change things going forwards?
Yeah, for us at Grace Trust, I think it's been a real learning period. The whole thing, right the way back from March the 30th, 2020. It's been quite an experience. I think the key things for us that have come through is to recognize that what's come our way has come this way to everybody. You know, nobody necessarily wanted this at all, and it's come our way. And I think in the initial days of it coming in, as it was for us and for all charities, the message was very stark: stay at home and save lives. And I think from that point there, we were really thrown in at the deep end. Everybody was thrown in. And they did what they could by looking at the world around us. Not necessarily what's the Jersey way of doing this, but what is everybody doing right now to take this on and to continue to do what we have always done as charities. And they weren't easy days for a lot of people involved, but I think in general, I would say Jersey did very well in being able to move very quickly. I think though, but from there though, what we've learned for us is to, how can I put it, to recognize that it's a combined effort to beat something like this. And you need to be able to stay in line with what you're being told. And that's something that we're not all used to. You know, it's something that we can feel that may have been in the past, but to have to be sitting around a radio on a Sunday evening, listening to an announcement, and then realizing the next day from 8 o'clock, everything's in lockdown. It was quite something. And, you know, for us to be able to cope with that, and all of the other agencies did a brilliant job in being able to adapt so quickly. For us at Grace Trust, it was a matter of teaming up with Salvation Army, St. Vincent de Paul, Brightly, Jet, a whole bunch of agencies that worked so hard in those first few weeks, getting things together. And I think it was just quite an experience for everybody. But I think too, the main thrust of it for us, and I think for every charity, has been to be able to protect yourself, because unless we can protect ourselves, we're not going to be any good to our service users, you know. And that was really the main aim for us. the first 11 weeks into the lockdown saw the food bank operating as really like a delivery service, to whereby the message was simple: stay where you are, we'll come to you. But as things slowly opened up, that changed, and the volunteer sector that got hands-on in those early stages were able to go back to work. So then we were able then as Grace Trust to assist in the food bank at Minden with Salvation Army, and then for the next 11 weeks, we were able to just run it as we did a food bank before, where people came to us. And then September 2020, the first, we moved back into Lewis Street, which was, for us, it was great to be able to get back into a familiar way of operating, how we had done before. But for the most pressurized time, without a doubt, was the circuit breaker for us, because at that time, November, December 2020, our numbers just went through the roof, or at least that's what we felt they went then. There was like 1,500, I think, or some above 1,000. And we were having to be really careful in how we operated. And volunteers coming in, people were just amazing. People were great. And I wouldn't say putting themselves at risk, but doing everything they could to preserve the service we wanted to give. And we saw our numbers of service users go really high. And they continue to be very, very high since COVID. But I think too, the ability to remain positive for the people who are coming to you, you know.
How do you think that will change the future, or will it change in the future? What have you learned that you'll carry on doing, that you?
I think really learn to be flexible. I think learned as well to just to be steady, you know, to operate with what you know. Don't be overcome by what you don't know, but just operate with what you know. And I think the last year here has been really beneficial for us to be able to cope with the numbers that we're seeing now, since, you know, in relation to pre-COVID. And so, yeah.
So the numbers have gone up then, sort of thing, from pre-COVID.
Yeah, they have, definitely. And it's not really a surprise, but there we are. I think a lot of people got hit sideways by this. A lot of people in hospitality, a lot of people who never earned a great deal anyway, you know, have suddenly found themselves needing a food bank. But then again, like only 40% of the people we saw, 40% of the 399 people we saw last year came to us once. Yeah, 14% came no more than 3 times. So in some aspects, you know, it's a very valuable thing that we're offering. But I'd just like to say as well, the hardest thing too was that because we're all side-by-side charities, not to be able to get side by side with people was just so difficult. You couldn't even sit around the same computer as your colleagues, you know. It was really hard. And you needed a bit of a sense of humor to get you through it. I wish I had a better sense of humor at the time, because, you know, it was really difficult.
Okay, thanks, Vini. What about you guys, Yvonne? What about the challenges at Caring Cooks during the pandemic, and how that will go forward, just dealing with the question that we gave to Vini?
Hi, Kevin. Hi, everybody. And I'm sorry for the late arrival. I had technical issues as usual. I totally understand everything that Vini is saying. We've faced so many challenges over the past year, mainly because most of our services that we offer are connected to schools. So our educational programs, our school meals service, you know, if the schools close or year groups are absent due to COVID, then we're obviously massively affected. There's also the challenge of our own staff being unable to work during COVID. You know, it's not just a case of, well, you can work from home, you know, that they're on the front line here. So whether that's kind of testing positive or their own children have been absent from school for the same reason. I think the way that we've mitigated this is by being able to kind of pivot our services and make quick decisions in response to the challenges that we've been faced with, which is how, you know, this is the only way we can move forward. So the changes that we've had to make very, very quickly, for instance, would be in terms of our primary school services. We've had to change a couple of times from a hot to a cold service, you know, and it's not an ideal situation, but for us to be able to offer something rather than nothing is the most important thing. So this happened at the beginning of this term when our chefs were isolating due to COVID. And we really don't want to close that service down. So we had to really think about, you know, how can we make this work without too much change at the same time? Luckily, it did work. And, you know, parents were just grateful that their children were offered something at school rather than nothing. Other ways that we've kind of had to make changes is by, you know, ensuring that our workforce is flexible in moving between roles to cover inevitable staff absences. You know, you know, you have to be really good at communicating to your staff, and, you know, they have to understand what's going on around them. And be prepared to be able to change their role. So, you know, you might have staff in one school having to go to another school for a day or two. Luckily, everyone's adapted to that and it's worked perfectly. Yeah, other kind of challenges we've had are, you know, children working in bubbles, being able to kind of fit into those new timetables within the schools is always a challenge. In terms of our weekly meal service, there's been a couple of times where we haven't been able to provide a hot meal and deliver it to our families. So we use that as an opportunity to kind of, rather than provide a crisis service, empower those families to cook for themselves. So we've put together a box of ingredients, kind of like a HelloFresh scenario, with a recipe card, and they've actually cooked for themselves, which is really empowering.
Great, thanks, Yvonne. Patricia, do you want?
I guess in terms of responding to things generally, Kevin, or do you mean the issues that we're facing?
You know, the dealing with it as a day-to-day issue, really, and you know how that will change going forward.
Yeah. I think one of the key bits, important things for us was we quickly got online to be able to, because obviously the core of the pandemic was around the impact on people's mental health. So it was really important that we kept a service going in some way or other, and many were able to adapt online, which was really helpful. And just like Yvonne mentioned, in terms of incidental outcomes, that's actually something that we will keep as something that was useful, that we might not have done had we not been faced with the crisis. So I think that was a good example of, I suppose, something that came out of a bad situation. And then others, of course, was about adapting and meeting people outside when that was allowed. So there was measures that worked for some people, because I guess the whole idea of a pandemic was some people with ongoing anxiety. This is something they'd have been worrying about in lots of different ways, and then here it was in reality. So it was really important that we were there to support people through it, and that we continue to do that, because it's being kind to ourselves and realizing that actually some of the impacts of the pandemic is going to take time for people to get back to the so-called normal.
Okay, thanks, Tricia. Lauren, I guess going online was also a thing that was possible for Macmillan as well.
Yeah, we did more telephone support, which is something in the past people didn't seem to prefer. People wanted to meet face to face, especially when having really difficult emotional support discussions. But suddenly our phone support service significantly increased. And the other thing is, we've never, despite people often thinking this about Macmillan, but Macmillan and Jersey had never offered a home visit service. So we were able to secure some funding to increase some resources so that some of our staff, our professional staff, could go into people's homes, whether that was safely within their home or meeting them in a garden or public space. And I think people, although there wasn't a huge uptake, but the support that was provided at that time was valuable to those individuals that needed it. And I think the trauma just changed for people. Going through cancer is a really traumatic life experience, but because suddenly all the normal systems in place to diagnose, to treat, to support people, everything changed. So I think from our perspective, our team really had to change their kind of support structures in place as well, and their understanding of the impact of this trauma, because the normal things weren't in place to support people like they were. And I think in the effect of that is even my team themselves, some of our support team themselves developed trauma, because at times they just felt so helpless. People weren't getting access to the treatment they needed. People were at home really poorly dealing with side effects of treatment, and their own family couldn't visit them and offer them that kind of support. So really difficult times, but the increased access that we developed is absolutely something that we will continue to offer as we go forward.
Thanks, Laura. So thinking about a post-pandemic world or an endemic world, how will charities need to adapt their offerings to keep their services going? And I'm going to come to Yvonne first for that question. How will they need to adapt?
Sorry, just going off mute again. You know, I think we've got to take how we've been working and you know, build on those, learn to be responsive, you know, taking each day as it comes. You know, there's no solution to this, and I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. I think collaboration as well, you know, we're all working for the same goal here. We're all working for a better Jersey. We all need to be working together and, you know, pull together those resources and those ideas as to how we can move forward.
And do you think the one upside of the pandemic then, Yvonne, really has been increased collaboration between charities, which is obviously desirable for all of us, really, if that's possible?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Like I say, we're all working to the same goals here, and if we, you know, 100 brains are better than one, and you know, if you are struggling with a service, or you know, you have hit that brick wall or a stumbling block, you know, reach out to other charities and ask what they're doing, how they're mitigating it. You know, we're all working together.
And collaboration with government, do you think that was improved over that period of time, given that they're often key partners in these?
Certainly from our perspective, we work very, very closely with government, with the SIPES team, because obviously we're working with schools and education. What I have noticed is, you know, they're going through the same thing as well. You know, they're open to suggestion and opportunity as well. We're very lucky in having a really good relationship with them. And yes, we're all working towards the same goals, and it's all about outcomes. You know, we're working towards achieving the same outcomes. I certainly think government have been more kind of open with how we can move forward, and I think, you know, other charities moving forward take the opportunity, you know, speak out, talk about what your challenges are and whether they can help in any way, shape or form.
Thanks, Yvonne. Patricia, what do you have to say about adapting to this new world? What would be your view?
I think it's similar to, again, as our colleagues have said, is making sure we speak to the people as well who are on the receiving end of our services, because I think that's again something that we've really had to focus on and think about more because of the change in the way we delivered our services. And that has only got to be a good thing, because we frequently talk about participation and, I suppose, co-production with the people who use our services. But often, including myself, it can be nothing more than rhetoric. So this has made us really think about what are the key areas in your life that's working well for you, and what are the areas you want some support for. So I think adapting has also got us thinking more about strengths in our communities. You know, what is it that's working? What's working well with you and your families and your community, and what is it you need help from either the charity sector and alongside the government? Because that has got to be a curve that we probably all need to focus on, because and that could be one of the real benefits of rethinking, as we say, about how we do things going forward. So adapting would be around putting the people on the receiving end at the focus, and finding out what they want and need rather than what we think they want and need.
Thanks, Patricia. I mean, I don't, from my experience, the further away you get from a problem, the less sort of urgent and important it can appear. And I suppose coming to Lauren is that, you know, seeing people and being with people and getting a real understanding of what they're going through is much easier when you can actually meet them and see them, rather than talk to them on a phone or via a Teams call or something like that, especially if something like cancer or mental health. So presumably the adapting won't be going totally digital for very few charities.
No, and I think listening is still key, because you can still, I think you can listen as effectively over the phone as you can face to face, or ineffectively. You know, it can work both ways, just like these. So yeah, it'll be a mix.
But being as close to the challenge, to the point, I suppose, is trying to make it being as close to the person who's going through it as you can, rather than via 3 or 4 other people. And I suppose that's about, to get urgency for these things, often you need to see the problem firsthand. I'm sure Vini will comment on that in a moment, sort of thing. But Lauren, what about your adapting to that new world?
Yeah, I think tying in aspects of what Patricia said, and also Yvonne around the partnerships, is that we kind of working at this together and really listening to what the person needed. And we took some time whilst we weren't able to meet with people face to face, but we ran some surveys with people using our service, and what was really important to them that we brought back as early as possible as we kind of started to reopen our services. And the challenge with that is that we've experienced significant reduction in income in that time. So we also had to really carefully balance our resource costs. But one of the things that people really wanted to come back promptly was our wellbeing services, like access to complementary therapies, massage, reflexology, which we as an organisation were prioritising more the professional, the counselling based emotional support. Actually, because people hadn't had, people had been in isolation, maybe they've not had, a hug with somebody, for example, for months. They needed that time out of their homes. So, tying in with Patricia around that kind of listening to what people wanted, but then partnering. So we spoke to our colleagues at Jersey Hospice, and they shared a similar view that they felt there was a real importance of bringing back these services quite early, even though in the UK, these were things that weren't high on the agenda to return in cancer services. And together we co-funded a role, because that meant we could sustainably finance it. And we brought in the first paid complementary therapist to work across both Jersey Hospice and Macmillan Jersey to ensure that people got that kind of care that they needed. And that's something that we'll continue to do now. How do we look to partner with other organisations to make sure we have the right resources based on what people's needs are?
Thanks. Final word from you, Vini, on adapting services.
Yeah, I think since last April, when we were able to get our other projects up and running, which are much more you know, side by side, like the art, the singing, the lunches, all of the cook days that we do. And I think for us, it was so good to be back alongside the people that we help. And it's a shame in a way that the food bank took so much priority, but at that point in time, it was all that we could really do. So we had to adapt with that and continue to. And I think as well, the ways in which the other charities can work together, be aware of what each charity is doing, can only be beneficial in the long run to us all, you know. So yeah, I think going forward, I think it's with a little bit of anticipation, but we've got to remain kind of positive and say, you know, have something to aim for. And I mean, it was thankfully for us, that is a real simple application of just being there for people. And as Patricia said, it will always be about listening. It will always be about being available for people and to just brighten their day as best as we can, however difficult it may be for them. And if we can continue to do that, then for us, it is job done. You know, somebody knocking at the window.
Thanks, Vini. Unfortunately, we have to talk about money because I think charities need money to survive. And we want to talk about what measures charities have done to actually recover their finances. And I'm going to come to Tricia on that one first. What have you been doing to sort the bank balance out?
To look at the strings, Kevin. I guess we've got a number of measures for trying to recoup some of the losses, because we've been one of the key themes, I suppose, that we're all talking about is trying to have some sustainable income streams. And this is vital because even after all the lockdown measures are fully lifted, which we hope is not too long away, ourselves, Mind Jersey and other charities, I know, are facing a black hole in terms of vital cash generations from the usual events that we would have been doing over the last 18 months. And I think there's ongoing reluctance to plan things as well. My colleague said to me recently, she said, 2 years into COVID, people laugh when charities start to make plans. So I think that's very telling in terms of making sure that we have some sustainable income streams that don't rely sometimes on the old faithfuls. So that's a big thing. And one of the sustainable income streams that we're looking at is around payroll giving. And the idea, because I think this is particularly important to think about payroll giving now, because some people, individuals and companies, have come out of COVID slightly better off, or better off in some ways, while other people have come out emotionally and economically not in a good place in terms of their mental health. So we're really trying to describe and explain how payroll giving might work if an organization partners with us at Mind. And we're trying to tell a story about how if for instance, if we had 10 companies where people give £5 per week, government in the form of tax can also give us £15. And over time, we are trying to explain and show companies how that could help us to have some substantial, sustainable income. And I think that narrative needs developing, and because sometimes people want to support charities or they want to do something, but sometimes they're not sure what will happen if I give £5, or that's not going to make any difference. What we're trying to develop in terms of this story and this approach is that whether it's £5 or £5,000, there's a substantial difference that can make to the lives of people who are actually going through some distress in their lives. So alongside the payroll giving, when we work with companies, and in the last quarter particularly, we've been trying to make sure that we get the message across that it isn't about a charity coming, taking the money and run, so to speak, because we can be accused of that, and that can happen when people get busy and worried about finances. So in autumn, we had examples where companies who joined up and partnered with us, in return, we had projects where if some companies had a lot of parents maybe concerned about the well-being of their young people, we had some troubled teenager sessions. Another company had gone through quite a lot of loss and difficulties in their staff. So we talked about loss and grief. So it was being very reactive to what it was people needed. And that we are joining alongside the idea of payroll giving. So it's a real refocus on how it is we build partnerships with companies, because I think that's a really, and that goes back to what Lauren and Yvonne said earlier, and Vini, about how do we reassure organisations that the £5 or the £5,000 they give us is used in terms of the outcomes that will make a real difference to people. Because it was always important to think about how much we did, how well did we do it, how do we know anybody is better off. But it's actually vital now, as finances are, challenged for many charities. It's not enough to say we're really busy or we're doing this, this, and this in terms of numbers. We're really making a focus on, the sustainable difference that we can make to people's lives. That's a key message we're getting across. And I think the challenge of the fact that many of us will be drawing on our reserves, if we're lucky enough to have some reserves, but that's not sustainable over a long time, over a longer time. So we're also making, in terms of a measure, and events like this is raising awareness of the actual amount of fundraising that charities do in support of the work that happens in our community, because sometimes that story doesn't get told. And I think there's something, it's making it, I guess it's clearer and developing that conversation around what is it that we can do, and obviously what support we need, and how can we develop that to make sure more people get the help they need earlier.
Thanks, Trish. Lauren, what about your bank balance at Macmillan? I guess it's been somewhat depleted as well.
Yeah, it has been, and really similar to what Patricia's saying. We're looking at our sustainability streams, and a key one, exactly the same, is regular giving or payroll giving, and we call it the give and get approach, Patricia. So in terms of exactly like you're saying, where we're looking to receive money in this way, but what can we give back to whether it's corporate employees, or whether it's the community, and we receive such a small amount in regular giving currently. I mean, less than 100 people on Ireland provide that kind of small monthly donation. But what we know as organisations in the charity sector, when you look at the kind of evidence on this, is once you have somebody giving a regular donation, that's likely to continue for a number of years. And I think the average I last understood was about 7 years. So you can start to then, when you're forecasting for the year ahead, you can forecast with a little bit more certainty. As to 2 years ago, Macmillan Jersey hugely relied on our events. About 75% of our income came from events. We don't receive any funds from Macmillan in the UK or the government. So 75% of our income was wiped out. And genuinely, the only reason we came out of Macmillan Jersey in a stable position is because a family over here saw some messaging and campaigning we were doing about the impact that Macmillan Jersey makes on the lives of islanders affected by cancer, and their father had died the year before, and they decided to make a really sizable donation to the charity. And it's for that reason alone that we're probably in a strong position starting this year, and we've not had to make significant cutbacks to our services or our resources.
That's a relief to hear. Vini, what about the funds at Grace Trust?
Yeah, I think I like what Lauren was just expressing there. I think because of the nature of our work and the general public perception of the people that we work with, we were able to see virtually every layer of Jersey want to be able to help, because either they were very aware that there are certain problems that were there before COVID and will be there after COVID, or there would be people who would say, I'm giving you this because you helped so-and-so in my family, or because I came to you one time and you were so helpful to me, and you didn't ask me this, you didn't ask me that, you just simply offered practical help to me. And that was their opportunity just to be able to to show what Jersey can be really good at. And we were very, very privileged in a way, like I say, to see every layer of Jersey coming, calling us to say, how can we help? And it really did help us hold steady. And that was good to see, that there was still a lot of heart, there was still a lot of love out there, you know. And that was good. It was good to have that. But I think as well, you know, the problems will still be there. People still get ill, you know. Nobody asks to have cancer. Nobody asks to have depression in their lives. And we mustn't just kind of say, oh, this is all a result of COVID. These issues were there and they will continue to be, you know. And so whatever any charity can do, it's so beneficial to such a tight community that we have. In a way, it's such a small place, and it's really hard for people to kind of how can I put it, get through stuff without it becoming common knowledge. When some people don't want that, you know, they still want that little bit of privacy, that be able to keep that little bit of dignity for themselves and not have it as like a great big group thing. They just, you know, and if we can offer that as well individually as charities, you know, then you need to make sure that, for me, that's where my heart is at on it, you know.
Thanks, Vini. Yvonne?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, really. We all knew as charities that, you know, our fundraising was going to suffer because of the lack of events, which is why we took on a government contract to provide secondary schools with hot school meals. Unfortunately, it didn't quite plug that fundraising gap, but we are working really, really hard to make sure that, you know, that we do start making money on that. The one good thing is that we did seek government support for lost income on school meals where we needed it, and I think we were extremely lucky that we were able to do that. So yeah, I think moving forward, we all just have to get a bit more creative with events, you know, being more proactive in going out, reaching out to corporates, and asking them, you know, if we could be their chosen charity. It's just all about being proactive and being creative.
Thanks, Yvonne. Well, if I could just say from the point of view of the AJC, we're all, I think the payroll giving, to Tricia's point, is a major opportunity to create more regular giving by islanders who benefit from the charities that we represent. And I know we're getting a lot of support from the Institute of Directors as far as the employers are concerned. The interesting thing about it is I think payroll giving is one of the best kept secrets in the island, and we all are working hard to change that. And obviously the charities themselves have got a big part to play in getting that message across, that not only are there tax advantages, not only is it unrestricted income, but it also is regular diversified giving where, as Lauren said before, lots of small donations that tend to stick around, and an engagement from the people that use the charities. I think that's probably even more important than the money in a way. So we're going to the last question, and we're kind of, Lynn's prompting me on the time. So we're going to go to Lauren to talk about the key drivers for the sector in looking forwards. So Lauren, I'm told to try and keep everybody prompt this time. That's probably me that's been not very good at chairing it. So what do you see as the key challenges post-COVID?
Yeah, key driver for the year ahead is, it comes back to the sustainability of income and grant applications. And last year, the government spent a good half of the year developing a commissioning strategy, and this ties into the Jersey Care model. So for the next part of the year, a key driver for us is working and developing partnerships with other charities as well to identify which services sit best in the community under the Jersey care model. And whilst we don't apply and we don't receive any funds for delivery of our services to date, but trying to secure some funding for cancer support services in the community in the future. And this isn't just about funding either, it's about access for people. And we believe quite strongly if Macmillan Jersey services are commissioned and they're part of what we call a pathway of care, that an individual and their family, when they receive that diagnosis, it's just not the medical care they receive, but just as important, their emotional, their spiritual, financial needs, everything is provided to them. So a key driver for us is definitely looking at how we can place ourselves within the Jersey care model and how we ensure that that work is done in partnership with other organisations across the sector. And that increases the access as well, we believe, for services. And then from a personal perspective, as a challenge, but also an opportunity for Macmillan Jersey in the coming year is a bit of stabilisation of our resources. I mean, the last couple of years, we've probably worked harder than we have done ever. I've been with the charity 9 years, really difficult years, a really difficult couple of years. We had 6 new members appointed on our board of directors. So we've got a period of bedding down there, new staff, new volunteers, and we're just in the throes of going through a leadership restructure. So there's a lot of change on the cards, and we've got to, you know, an aspect of this is really positive because what we're looking at within our restructure is really placing people to their strengths. And I think this actually came from COVID too, is we almost ripped up job descriptions at one point because we just needed all hands to the ground, and we were saying, right, who's got skills in this area? And we did a lot more kind of blended roles, and now we're taking that forward into a restructure of the organisation. What we need to be careful about, because we have an ambitious strategy and we're in growing mode, and we want to keep the kind of the ignition there, but we just also need to be mindful that our team are tired. You know, there's fatigue setting in, and, you know, I know we're starting to feel hopefully a little bit confident that we're coming out of the pandemic. I feel like we all do probably need to take a few breaths and just recognise what we've all been through collectively. And just, yeah, be kind to ourselves, I guess, as we go forward.
Thanks, fine. Yvonne, there's a key drivers.
Yeah, I mean, our key drivers are, you know, there's a huge shortage of hospitality staff. So, you know, having the availability of staff on the island is really important to us, especially moving forward now that we're expanding and we're hoping to expand even further. That really is could be a big issue for us. One of the other drivers is, you know, ongoing government support. We need to keep that going. Availability of premises in order to expand. You know, we need bigger premises. So all of those kind of come into play, which is what we're working on right now.
Thanks, Yvonne. Vini?
Yeah, I think to be really, really honest, I feel it's like I need a reboot. Just need a reboot, you know, to be able to, and to remind yourself of why you're doing what you were doing, why you were doing what you were doing before these last couple of years, what it was that inspired you to do what you do, and as ever to try and get some original thoughts going on how to really practically help somebody, you know, how to take what people have given us and turn it into something that just is really good for them, and helps them. And it doesn't always cost a lot, you know. And yeah, but for me personally, and I think as well, to inspire the team around you, you know, to inspire them. And don't forget your volunteers, don't forget the people that you're working with. Yeah, but reboot it all, kick it back into gear, you know.
Okay. Trish, final word from you. I've got one last question for you that I'm going to hit you afterwards, but just a final one on this from you, Trish. Quick answer on that.
Yeah, I guess it's keeping a focus on how inequalities can impact on mental health and ensuring that people who are affected for whatever reason in that way, that they can access the support that they need and want, because we have a real opportunity to do things differently and we mustn't lose that opportunity.
Great. So my final question is, we've got an election this year, and we might even have a couple of prospective politicians joining the webinar today. So in one sentence for each of you, what could politicians do in 2022 to make it easier for charities to do the good that they do? And you can take that one first, Trish. That's okay.
I think it's talk to us, and they need. I guess one of the things that I thought about before this webinar is, do actually politicians know, do the general public know the extent of the charity work, as I mentioned earlier? So I think there could be a bit of engagement in that, in terms of how much is raised within the different charities that presents and develops the services that are here. And if we disappeared tomorrow, what that gap would be, I think would be something that would help organize thinking around where the gaps are, what is it we need to be doing more of, and what are the challenges going forward in terms of sustainability. So I think that is something I think they need to engage in.
Laura?
Yes, it's the same. Listen, it's the same as we do to our service users, as we do to our staff. Same to the politicians. Just listen and support us. I think the more they know about the amazing work that goes on and the hearts and minds that drive the local community charity sector, I think they'll be inspired, and maybe through that inspiration, they might be able to identify novel ways they can help us. And I'm sure there's pockets of, I've seen it published before, pockets of government money that's not so easy to access, but maybe they can help us access funds that haven't been easily made available to better the health of the local population.
Great. Your door's open. You're listening to them as well, obviously. Yvonne?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's all about engagement. Get on the shop floor, witness what we're doing. I know it's impossible for everyone to do that and to go around all of the charities, but yeah, just get involved. There are certain politicians out there that do make that engagement. They interact with you, they're helping charities out there, and it makes such a massive difference. And communications, talk to the public about what the charities are doing as well. It's all about awareness of what we're all trying to achieve.
Great, thank you. Vini, you'll accept a few politicians helping at the food bank, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that. Yeah, come on down. Come and see us. If you want to know what's going on, come and see us. Yeah. And if it's your birthday, I'll sing you happy birthday while you're here.
Possibly a good way to get to a bit of Jersey that people sometimes don't always see, including some people who are homeless, which is a huge issue.
Yeah, come on down and you'll be welcome. There's a seat here for you. The kettle's on. We've got some homemade cookies. Come and spend a morning with us. And well, you go to any of these places. Go to where the people are and ask them.
Great.
I'm coming, Vinny. I'm coming. That sounds like a great invitation.
I'm coming too. I'll bring cookies.
Yeah, good.
All right. Well, assuming we don't have any more questions, and I'm just looking to Lynn, who was keeping them from the audience, I'm going to wrap things up. But do we have any more questions from the audience? If not, I'm going to thank you all so much for joining today. And, I think we all know the work that charities do, but sometimes you do need to get right up to the coalface and just see the challenges that the island has. We're lucky people generally, and we don't always realise. And I'm with Tricia on this. If we can get employers picking up this payroll giving, I think. I was speaking to one the other day, and they said only 1/3 of our staff would be interested in a scheme, and they expected me to be disappointed by that. And I went back and said, if 10% of staff were contributing regularly, I've regard that as fantastic news to start off with. So we need their help, not just money, but money helps. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for everybody who's joined the webinar today. Good luck for 2022.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, everyone.